In this video, I would like to share with you my research on why good music is good. This video will help you better understand your preferences in music by using content learned in this class. It will also help you understand why your definition of good music may differ from your friends. I read articles by people like Simon Frith, professor at UC Berkeley and Oxford University. I watched videos such as Jackson Jin's TED Talk on music. To explain why good music is good, I will be using Mickey Willis's list of questions from his article, What Makes Good Music Good? After reading several other sources, I have reprioritized the questions to fit what average listeners consider to be the most important characteristics of good music. I did this because it is unlikely any of us in the class are music majors, so I wanted the information to be presented in the most digestible format. Mickey Willis is a composer and jazz pianist who received his DMA in music composition from Louisiana State University. When discussing these questions, I will discuss them with reference to modern-day pop music, with some reference to notable classics, and I'll frame them from the perspective of the average music listener. Willis's first question to determine good music is, does the piece appeal on a variety of levels? Intellectual, emotional, spiritual? A piece can be strong enough in any one of these areas to justify being called good, but the best music somehow seems to appeal on many levels. Does the music speak to me? We all feel emotion. Some emotions we like to feel. Some emotions we need to feel. A lot of times, to best feel an emotion to its fullest potential, we stimulate our minds and hearts with music that pushes us in whatever direction we are seeking. For example, at celebration parties, we like to feel happy, so we play music with major keys to enrich the feeling of accomplishment. At funerals, we listen to music in minor keys to fully embody the sadness or loss we are experiencing. Universally, good music helps us feel, precisely, the emotion we are feeling. Referring to Willis's question, he says the best music appeals on a variety of levels, intellectual, emotional, spiritual. But he does refer to a caveat where a piece of music can be called good if it only appeals to one of these levels. There is a lot of good music, as defined by popularity among the general population, that only satisfies the emotional level. For example, Skrillex held the #1 spot on Billboard's Top 50 Artists for a full week in 2012. His song, Drop the Bass, has no words to it whatsoever. From listening to the song, I don't believe the artist was shooting for his listeners to make an intellectual or spiritual connection to his song. It is an electronic dance song, which is a genre typically appealing to an emotion. I agree with Willis when he says the best music appeals to emotional, intellectual, and spiritual levels. If a song does not appeal to any of the three categories, the song is probably bad. This is the likely reason that many of us don't listen to tunes like Mary Had a Little Lamb at our age, because it doesn't evoke an emotional, intellectual, or spiritual response. Willis's next question to determine what is good music is there a feeling of musicality about it? That is, does the piece invoke a desire for body movement that corresponds to the gestures in sound? Musicality is distinctly human and inexorably connected to physical movement. When a song is freshly aired on the radio or pops up in your Discover Weekly playlist on Spotify, or your Pandora radio shuffles to a song you haven't heard before, a likely way you determine whether the song is good or not is by your physical response. This is related to, but not quite the same as what Willis was pointing to with his first question. In his first question, Willis was pointing to the mind and the heart. Now he ties in our physical connection to the music. There are very obvious ways we can have a physical connection to the music. Going back to the Skrillex/electronic dance music example, if the music is good, we have a desire to dance to it. But what about a symphonic concert? We don't exactly feel the need to dance. Does that make Brahms' Second Symphony bad? No. We have a different physical connection to that type of music. Classical music will more often give you the tingles or create a physical feeling of excitement or darkness or urgency in your chest. It can make you smile or grit your teeth. Good music will generate a physical response from your body. Bad music does not motivate you in this fashion. Bad music is uninteresting and fails to reach the listener on a physical level. Willis's next question to determine good music is, do you feel positively stimulated, better, richer, fuller, or improved in some way for having heard the piece? The best music makes us better by stimulating our minds and touching our hearts, and helps us feel better about ourselves and the world. The previous two questions concern the effect the music has on the listener during the listening period. This question pertains to the effect the music has on the listener after the song is ended. Good music will have a lasting impact on the listener. It will make them think in depth about a specific subject, or it will heighten an emotion. It will leave the listener with a feeling of resolve or accomplishment. Good music will inspire the listener to reach great heights or continue in their journey. Bad music is not necessarily the opposite in this case. Bad music won't necessarily make you feel worse or uninspired, but rather it will have a very little effect on the listener. The previous three questions I discussed are mostly concerned with a song's ability to communicate effectively with its listener. They focus on how the listener is feeling and responding to the song. It is how we identify good music. But what makes up good music? These next four questions will answer more clearly what makes good music good by discussing musical characteristics of good music. Willis's next question that determines the musical qualities of good music is there a good balance between familiarity and variety, appropriate for the length of a piece? This question instantly reminded me of the TED Talk in one of our earliest lessons. Jackson Jin talks about predictability and variability. The first three questions above universally define what good music is to every single person. Every single person, when they hear good music as they define it, will have either an emotional, spiritual, or intellectual response, or maybe even all three. And they will be physically affected by the music in some way. And the music will have some lasting effect on them that may be as deep as helping them discover a new part of themselves, or as superficial as a good bodily feeling. Through the current question, though, is where people start to individually define good music for themselves. Jackson Jin talks about how music is a balance of predictability and variability. Each person defines for themselves just how much predictability and variability they like in the music that they listen to or the music that they compose. In the case of John Glass, he likes to write very long and very predictable music. Most people find this very annoying and would likely categorize this as bad music if they categorize this as music at all. Similarly, Jin talks about John Cage's experimental music with a feather stroking an amplified cactus. This music is extremely unpredictable, therefore very variable, and would be categorized as bad music by most people. On average, people gravitate towards a middle ground that is generally equal parts predictable and variable. Some people lean a little to the left, some people lean a little to the right. In the frame of pop music, most songs are more predictable with a few elements of variability. They are relatively simple and use variations to color in emotion or excitement. The variability grabs our attention and makes a piece interesting. An example of a relatively simple song with light variations is Miley Cyrus's Wrecking Ball. The variation is found in her dynamic range between the verse, the bridge, and the chorus. During the verse and the bridge, the dynamic range is medium to low. She is conveying a specific emotion here that is most recognizable as frustration, sadness, and defeat. But with the chorus and the variation in dynamic range, She changes the entire mood and energy of the song with a declaration of defiance. Another quick example of a mostly predictable song that was made interesting with variability is Whitney Houston's I Will Always Love You. In this song, Whitney Houston uses a key change. In this song, Whitney Houston uses a key change at the end to introduce some variability. In popular opinion, these songs are good, and they achieve this label by utilizing what Jin refers to as variability, strategically placed in predictability. A different example of a good piece of music that is a little heavier on variability is Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. The rhythm and harmony in the beginning of this song are constantly changing and never repeating themselves. Like I said before, each person will gravitate towards their own desired mix of variability and predictability. This will ultimately define what they believe to be good music. Different mixtures of variability and predictability are found in every genre, within every artist's discography, and can even change from song to song within an album. In general, good classical music has more variability than good modern pop music by necessity. Classical compositions are generally much longer. However, variability and predictability are preferences that change from composer to composer and listener to listener. Good music, in this sense, is defined by the individual's preference. Willis's next question in determining a good piece of music is, after having been listened to many times, does a piece still have an appeal? Appeal that is based on some new revelations rather than solely on comfortable familiarity? This question mostly refers to the complexity of the music. Each time a listener goes back to the same song, are they discovering something new in the music? Are they discovering something new in the emotional, intellectual, spiritual, or physical response? Good music often is dense with style. Just like any other type of art, even if it is minimalistic, the artist is experienced and knows how to make even simple art very powerful and meaningful. They know how to hide nuanced details on the first experience, but then also reveal them systematically the next time the art is seen, heard, smelt, felt, or tasted. This is usually done with many of the musical characteristics we learn throughout this course, which I will discuss in the next of Willis's questions, which is, does it exploit a variety of elements of music? To the average listener, these elements of music are not obvious, and therefore not overly important from their perspective. The average listener will talk about sound, but from this class, we know there are many elements of music, and they are critical in determining different qualities of music. Some examples of elements of music that Willis refers to are rhythm, harmony, melody, and timbre. Good songs are not required to have all the musical elements that I just listed, nor do they have to include all the ones we learned about in this course. However, songs that rely on only one element would probably not be very fulfilling. Even simple yet good acoustic guitar songs like Clairvoyant by Story So Far have only one instrument, so there isn't much instrumental variety, as is heard in symphonies. However, the singer uses musical elements such as key changes, changes in dynamic level, a specific rhythm that matches the melody, harmonizing his guitar with his voice, and a specific acoustic guitar to achieve a specific timbre. All of these elements are simple nuances to the average listener, but were purposeful in the artist's composition. In this sense, good music to one person may be defined as a slow rhythm. It may be defined by a sharp or tinny timbre. It may be defined by a large dynamic range, or a major sounding key. It's unlikely any listener has a specific list of musical elements they like, but if you were to put their top 5 songs side by side, it's likely many of the songs would have similar elements to them. The last question of Willis's we will explore to determine the qualities of good music is, are the elements of the work highly integrated so that each supports the other's function? Melody, for example, cannot exist without at least some degree of rhythm. It seems that most truly satisfying music exploits the elements in ways that cause the product of them to be greater than the sum of the elements. Lastly, but certainly not least, is the meshing/integration of all components of an individual's preferences to make a good song. How does the artist integrate rhythm into melody? How does the timbre of the instrument or the singer's voice sound as they change their dynamic level? Does the harmony mesh with all of this? Do the pieces fit together well, or are they too different? A song can have all of the preferences that a listener likes, but if none of the artist's selections mesh, the song can never be good. It can never be listened to multiple times for greater meaning. It will never evoke an emotional or intellectual, spiritual, or physical response. How an artist chooses to mesh all the musical elements in their song is arguably the most important and equally the hardest job of each composer. It is the least obvious accomplishment when studying a good song, and the most obvious failure when analyzing a bad song. This question concerns the least obvious facet of good music from the perspective of the average pop music listener. No matter what kind of music any given individual calls good, each good song will have the same qualities. A good song, to someone who calls it good, will evoke an emotional, intellectual, or spiritual response, or all three, and it will also evoke a physical response. It will affect its listener after the song is over. The song will be a perfect mix of variability and predictability according to the preferences of that person. The song will be complex enough to have tastefully hidden surprises waiting for the next listen. The song will employ the use of a variety of musical elements that are preferable to the listener's ears. And the composer will have done an artistic job of stitching each element of the song together to achieve the emotional, intellectual, or spiritual response from the listener. Thank you for listening. Here are the sources where I learned about the qualities of good music.